Hey guys, how are you? I hope your day is off to a great start. I'm here at the local church talking with my friend and pastor, Dr. Johnie Butler.
Hello, Mindy.
Hello, how are you?
Well,
thank you for being
You
here.
bet, you bet.
Johnny's gifts of the ministry to this community, particularly here at the local, include relationship counseling, personal wellness counseling, and in fact, all of the pastors here are really very outspoken and
True.
committed to the care and mental health of this congregation.
Yep.
And so we're going to talk about that today because mental health is important, and mental illness has a crippling effect and impact on our society these days. And, there's so many people struggling with depression and anxiety, and the number of suicides continues to climb every year, and no one's immune to it.
Right.
I mean, everybody is affected, whether it's somebody that you know or, somebody that has been impacted either directly. It's a very sad
Yeah.
situation that we're dealing with. In fact, of all the posts that I post on my Life Without Limits page, the one I posted in May about Mental Health Awareness Month, wow, that thing generated over 28,000 views, over 347 shares,
Okay.
and it
Okay.
still continues trending. Every single day I have people commenting on that particular post.
Wow.
That was very eye-opening for me, you guys. I mean, really, with with what's going on these days, it just highlights how really this has become an epidemic in this
It
country.
is. Yeah.
Anyone who follows my page or my group knows I'm a huge Joyce Meyer fan.
Yeah.
And I didn't start off that way. I didn't particularly like her when I first started listening to her because
Right.
she's a little abrasive. But after I heard her story and what she had been through at the hands of her father, and then losing her brother to suicide, to an overdose,
Right.
she makes it clear that no one's situation is hopeless. Nobody's situation. I mean, to grow up as a victim of sexual abuse,
Yeah.
and then to have your family just gone, and now your brother is now gone, she could have really taken a real
Yeah.
negative turn.
Absolutely.
But one thing that she always states, and this is true, and this is what we're talking about today,
Yeah.
is that there's always hope with God.
Yeah.
There's always hope with God. And even though all of our stories may be different, the path to God is the same.
Yeah.
And, personally for me, while therapy and medication are effective, and they're methods I continue to use, I have been trying to be more outspoken and really strongly encouraging my followers to not discount the power of God in prayer in this situation. The only thing is, though, I tend to find this topic of conversation makes people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons we're having this interview is because we want to dispel some of the stereotypes and the reasons that cause people to shut down when you start mentioning God.
Right.
That being said, I have asked Johnny if he would be so kind as to let me interview him.
Sure.
And for my Life Without Limits group, and share his knowledge and his experience and provide some insight for you guys as to the impact that faith can have on mental health and these conditions. Johnny, two of my personal favorite verses, especially when it comes to when I start dealing with anxiety and depression, are Hosea 4:6, which is, "My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge," and John 8:32, which is, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth shall set you free."
Yeah.
And it was really just
They're good.
that simple. And I believe for me that these biblical truths really simplified the idea for me that we just need to seek God.
Yeah.
We just need to seek Him for ourselves and ask Him to show us the way.
Right.
You know? So that being said, we're going to start off with our interview questions.
Oh, good.
And one of the first questions I get a lot is, do you find that when people have a verse or two that they can revert to, that it kind of helps them keep God in the forefront instead of on the back burner?
I do. I think that anything that we can focus on, but especially if it's the truth, especially if it's God's word, it helps to clarify things and helps to push some other things out. You shared two there. I'll give you a couple of my favorites, and I tell people this when you're struggling. And by the way, suffering is the common denominator of every human being. I don't have a lot in common with Bill Gates, especially financial-wise, but I can tell you, we're all, whether you're Bill Gates or whether you're Johnny or whomever, we're going to walk through trials, extended trials. We're going to go through suffering, and it's the one common denominator that we're all going to have in common. Now, a couple of the verses that I really like, and I tell people often, if you're walking through something and you really want to find God in it, you want to get close to God through this thing you're going through, man, get in the Psalms. The Psalms are right in the middle of the Bible. There's 150 of them. King David wrote half of them, but they weren't written on a mountaintop on a sunny day,
Right.
And we're just writing Shakespearean. They were written as somebody was really going through something. I mean, Psalm 23, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death,
Right.
I will fear no evil. I mean, David was going through things. A couple of my favorites. He heals the brokenhearted, and he binds up their wounds. That's Psalm 145. I love Psalm 147. God, you open your hand, and you satisfy the desire of every living thing. I hang on to those things when I'm going through certain things, when anxiety or even depression is trying to settle in on me. I find that focusing on the Psalm, so focusing on certain biblical truths helps again to begin to at least keep it at bay, begin to at least push it away a little bit for me.
I
So,
agree.
absolutely.
I definitely agree. I think the one question that I get asked the most is, how do you respond? And this is a tough one.
Yeah.
When people say to you, if God exists, then why does he allow all of these horrible things to happen?
Yeah. Fair question.
It's a tough question.
It's a tough question, but it's not one that we just came across yesterday.
Right.
Again, if you go back to the Psalm 76 is a psalm by a guy named Asaph who asked that very same question.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, my feet almost stumbled over this question because he saw people who were good suffering while people who were evil prospered. It was like, why are bad things happening to good people, God?
Right.
So we're not the first to ask this. I think we have to keep it all in context. I love philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Took philosophy way back at the University of Oklahoma. I've studied philosophy in seminary. I love it. But philosophy asks questions it can't answer. That's a philosophical question.
Okay.
Why does a good God allow, if God is good, why does he allow suffering to people who are good? Mm-hmm. And typically, you come up with these kind of answers. Either God isn't good, God doesn't exist, or he's not strong enough to do anything about it. I mean, it has to, in our minds, it has to be one of those three.
Right.
So we make it easy just to sort of walk away. But we have to remember that the Bible actually answers this question for us. It wasn't created this way. It won't end up this way. Right now, we're doing life in what's called a fallen world. It's not that hard to look at the world, see what's happening, look at history, and say, you know what, that's right. The world is fallen. It's overrun at times with destruction or with negative. You see good. You see creation, and you see some good. But the fact that it wasn't created this way, and it won't end up this way, but right now it's a fallen world. We have to keep it in that context. And also the fact that, again, you read through Scripture, you see that a lot of people go through a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
They're suffering. Christ himself suffered on the cross. We're going to go through some things, but God doesn't. I love that, Mindy. I love that verse. He never leaves us. He never forsakes us.
Yeah.
He'll walk through. If he brought you to it, he'll bring you through it.
Yep.
He walks us through those things. And so you have to look at it not philosophically, but you have to look at it biblically.
Right.
It was created perfect. One day it'll end up perfect. Right now it's a fallen world. God doesn't abandon us while these things happen. He walks us through them.
And I think we also have to realize we have an enemy.
We have an enemy.
We have an enemy that is I mean, his only focus is to destroy us.
Yes, to kill, steal, and destroy. Yeah. So keeping it in its proper context helps me to understand. It's life in a fallen world. It was created perfect. Genesis 3 happens. We have the fall. By Genesis 4, Cain kills Abel, and the family has suffered from that point on. And so, but then you go to the last book, Revelation, you read where he's going to restore everything. There's great hope in that. And through all of this, he never lets go of us. So there's hope even when we walk through those kind of things. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. And I love the fact that, I mean, you know, you see them in memes all the time, but and it's the truth is, in the end, God wins.
In the end,
I
he
mean,
wins.
it's really knowing that, right? If you want to jump ahead to the very last chapter,
please do.
God wins. So,
right.
so yeah,
That's
I think
right.
it's really important to remember that what we're in the middle of right now is the middle. It's not the
middle.
end.
That's right.
And sometimes it might seem like the end,
Yeah.
but hang on, because it isn't.
That's right.
It isn't.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So my next question is, and this is one that I had always struggled with, is how do you introduce the subject of God, more specifically Jesus, to non-believers without sounding preachy?
Preachy, yes, yes, and I can be preachy. But I have to keep in mind that that's not what won me. Now, I didn't go to church until 18 years old. I wasn't raised in church. I was raised in a moral home, but not a Christian home, not a church-going home. And so what really won me was just the thought of Jesus being relational. Preaching really does belong on Sundays. There is such a thing as preaching. It's for believers. It's for the edification and growth and maturity of the church and of Christians. But somebody who doesn't know God, and that's all of us at one point in time, I like to introduce it more, and it's true, as relationship.
Right.
It's not religion, it's relationship at the end of the day. Religion is our attempt to earn our way, climb that ladder of being good enough and get to God. But God's taking care of all of that. We can't do that. And so he sent his son to be in relationship with us. So I tell people, just simply talk to God. Just simply talk to Jesus. Treat him as the Bible says he's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. So just talk to him. Just share your issues, your trials, your struggles. Talk to him about what you're going through as if he's a friend that's sitting there. Look at him as relationship. It's relationship. It's not religion. So that's kind of how I introduce people, more specifically to Jesus. He's our, and he really is I'm going to use a word here that's sort of a churchy word, but he's the manifestation of the God you can't see. He's the manifestation of that in the flesh.
Right.
And he's really God's proof that he loves us. And that's why he sent Jesus. Jesus had relationships with people, and he wants a relationship with us. And so I look at it more like that. I want to be in relationship with Christ. So that's how I look at it. That's how I try to introduce people to it.
That's awesome. I think for me the problem is I tend to get so excited because it's one of those like, oh, if I could just tell you like everything he's
Yeah,
done for
right,
me,
right,
you know,
right,
and
right.
and you kind of get this like, oh, you're one of those like Jesus
Yeah.
freaks, and it's like, no, it's not like that.
Right,
I don't
right.
get brownie points for like recruiting.
No,
It's just,
no.
I just, you know, it's really what they talk about, sharing the good word
Yeah.
and sharing the gospel. And you know, for anybody who's who's become a believer from either an atheist perspective or an agnostic perspective. I mean,
Right.
Lee Strobel's a perfect example.
Strobel,
Those
case
are the
for
people that
Christ.
usually end up on fire
Yeah,
for Christ
right,
because
right.
you realize you've done the research, you know, all of the questions you wanted to answer, you've researched. And I always tell people right off the bat, you know, believing is the first part.
Yeah.
And seeking is really the first part.
True.
But then you have to do the research on your own. You have to read the word. All the questions, even the questions that we're doing now that are
Right.
really tough, are there.
They're there.
They're
Yeah.
really, really, truly in there. And so I think that's why sometimes I tend to try to go, okay, well, I got to reel it in a little, you know?
Yeah. It's called passion.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, it's true.
Here's a really, really tough one for you.
Okay.
And I know that I've dealt with some people in my life coaching that this one comes up, and it's just a very difficult question to answer in a shorter period of time. And
Right,
that's
right.
what words of encouragement would you offer to somebody who suffered a major loss, maybe a child or a really close family member, and feels like God just was not there for them? They prayed, and the loss happened anyway.
Right. By the way, I deal with that, if not a weekly basis, a monthly basis.
That's a tough one.
I just dealt with that yesterday, talking with a lady whose 24-year-old daughter died of an overdose.
Oh boy.
And so this isn't outside the realm of what God deals with every single day. I mean, he knows he knows our hurts, he knows our pains, he knows those things. But we're right to go to him and to ask to spare our child or to spare our loved one or to heal somebody. We pray for people to be healed all the time.
Yeah.
I pray every day for certain people to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
But I've done funerals and celebration of life for young people.
Mm-hmm.
Sunday coming up, this coming Sunday, we're going to do a celebration of life after the fourth service for a pediatrician doctor who lost his life to cancer, left 5 kids. We prayed for him as a church. The pastors went over. We laid hands on him. We prayed. I think it comes back to this, that God is sovereign. He is all powerful.
Right.
He knows. He's designed it. He's created it. We can only see a small part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It comes back to faith and trust that again, this is, yes, we're going to hurt, and yes, we're going to grieve, and it may not be normal ever again, and it may be years of grief that gradually gets a little lighter. But we don't grieve or hurt as though or experience loss as those who have no hope, because we have
Right.
hope.
Right.
And so it's not faithlessness to grieve. It's not faithlessness to hurt. It's not faithlessness to question God, why? I mean, I look at David, Psalm 13. He says, "Where are you, God? How long will you hide your face from me? Forever?" David himself had those thoughts.
Right.
Jesus is struggling in the Garden of Gethsemane. "Lord, if there's any other way, take it from me. But your will be done," is what he says. So it's certainly right to pray for one another. But we leave the results into the hands of the God who created us, and the God who's redeemed us, the God who we will spend eternity with. We leave it there. And so we're not going to have all of the questions answered
Right.
here.
Right.
We're
Right.
just not. But
That's true.
there are again, we have community of faith. We have brothers and sisters in Christ that can pray for one another. We can be there for one another. We can offer help.
Right.
We can offer practical help, practical support, which we're doing to that family that we're helping with the funeral and everything. And so it's a difficult thing when people say, "Where was God?" Listen, he wasn't on vacation.
Right.
He doesn't take time off.
You didn't do anything wrong. It's nothing that you didn't pray hard enough or any of that stuff.
Right. And something else, Mindy, we have to, it goes back to that fallen world stuff. I tell people all the time, the death rate is 1 per person. No one's getting out alive.
Right.
We will all have a day where it's our day.
Right.
Where we're going to meet the Creator.
Right.
We're going to have a day like that. Everyone is. And so I think it's Psalm 118, where God views it differently. He says, "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints." God looks at it as a graduation. Those who are in Christ graduate. I know Stephen, who we're going to do the celebration of Life Force Sunday. He's in heaven. He's rejoicing. He's with the Lord. And so that ultimately is where we put our hope, our faith, our thoughts. Little by little, God will begin to heal that wound. It may never quite go away until we go home. But again, we're not going to get all of the questions answered as to why. We don't always know why we suffer. We just are given how we suffer. We suffer in faith. We suffer in hope.
And as we get older, of course, too, I mean, you're going to have more loss as you age.
It adds up.
Unfortunately, it's one of the things that as we get older and we tend to lose. I've been losing a lot of friends from high school and in their late 50s, early 60s, going, what is going on? But we're not the only ones that suffer loss. And I do see a lot of people out there, a lot of really courageous, outspoken people who, even through their pain, even through their loss, are still praising God and are still really great examples of their faith has not been wavered in any way. And so I love to see that, because I think it kind of helps people feel a little less alone and isolated when they can find it. And that's the other thing, guys. If you're dealing with the loss of a child or something, due to suicide or overdose, find a group, find people that have gone through the same thing and can help you through that. They can important. They can comfort you, they be there for you, they understand what it feels like at 2:00 in the morning when everyone's asleep and you're just in your own head. And I can't stress that enough, how important it is to find groups, because there's groups everywhere, and there's always going to be groups of people that can relate to what our pain is in one way or another.
Absolutely.
So I really do encourage
That's
that.
Powerful.
So how about people like myself? Because growing up, I was raised Jewish, and it was just very, up until the bat mitzvah, and then it was kind of done, which I hear from a lot of people that are raised Jewish that, once the bat mitzvah's over, and then you don't really have much, then you're not really going to temple anymore, except maybe the high holidays. I had a really bad experience with organized religion, and I've been told before that the reason I'm dealing with depression or I'm dealing with these things is because I'm just not spiritual enough. And of course, the first thing you want to do is, your pushback is just, don't bring up, I don't want to hear about this. So what do you tell people that have had a bad experience?
Well, a lot of times it's just, I'm sorry you had that experience. Join the club.
Because pastors are not immune to bad experiences in religious organizations.
And pastors aren't immune to anxiety and depression and those kinds of things. We're very much human, and dealing with a lot of heaviness that we deal with. We can seep in sometimes. And so I know I've been a believer for about 43 years now. So I've seen some things make some movement for the good. I know back in the 70s and the 80s, even through the 90s, in my church tradition, which was Southern Baptist, and love a lot about that tradition, a lot about that tradition. But when you were hurting, you just carried your big King James and went into church with a smile. And we knew how to build this beautiful road to heaven with the gospel of Jesus. And it is a beautiful road to heaven. But we didn't know how to take it through the swamp of life. We didn't know how to make it apply to what you're going through. And we weren't, in certain ways, you weren't really allowed to. And then at some point in about the mid 90s and on, we've kind of started a little bit different approach to it, and that is with depression or anxiety or any kind of sort of tilt towards mental illness, or stresses or those kinds of things, that we've taken a more holistic look at it, and really a more honest look at it, because I love this about the Bible. It doesn't hide. It doesn't even attempt to hide the characters, the characteristics and the traits and the various things that the characters go through, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right.
It's all there.
Right.
And you can look at, and I would say probably a third of the characters that are mentioned in the Bible. By the way, the Bible's historically accurate. It's a historical narrative of the love of God for us. But there's probably a third of those people that you're reading what they're going through, and you're going, that's depression.
Right.
David was depressed when he went to the enemy's camp. He was, you can read. I mean, there's lots of others, but that's anxiety. You can see. So it's a human issue, and so I know that if you take a biblical approach with clinical awareness, you realize that these bodies were wonderfully designed and created, but it's a fallen world. So sometimes they don't always function at the level that they could or were designed to. My wife's pancreas doesn't produce insulin, so she's a type 1 diabetic. In the same way, some people's brains produce not enough serotonin or too much serotonin or too much dopamine or not enough or whatever. And you can go through sort of biochemical cycles where you just struggle with things. And we're more open and aware of that now as the church than we were back in the day.
Right. It's not such a stigma anymore either. I mean, things like postpartum depression that people used to be like, okay, come on, just
right.
It's really recognized now as a medical condition.
It is. It's a very real thing, and the church used to not view it as that, and it used to view it more as faithlessness. And so we've come a long way there. Yes, the gospel goes through the swamp of life. We also understand, again, that there may be some clinical approaches that are very helpful. There can be some medical approaches that are very helpful as well. And so that's what I would say is, we can all, I always think about this, just because somebody doesn't play, let's just say Bach or one of the greats very well, it doesn't mean you throw out everything. Just because somebody doesn't represent Christ very well doesn't mean you throw out everything.
Right.
That person was just a poor representative, and if you got some really tough advice, or you got church hurt because you were going through something and people told you just get over it, or if you had enough faith that you wouldn't be struggling with this, they're not playing it very well. They're not really playing it in the whole love that God had in mind, that unconditional love and grace and mercy and compassion and empathy, and all of that Jesus is. We can mess that up sometimes. So just understand there's people that don't understand, and they may give you some bad advice, But I think the church as a whole has made some big steps.
Oh, yeah.
Here at the local church,
Yeah.
we're biblically focused, we're Christ-centered, but we're clinically aware in our approach to mental health. And I think that's, at least as much as we know how to do well, we're doing it that way. So.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because, I was surprised to hear Joyce recently talking about her use of medication to deal with anxiety. Yeah. And I, first of all, I commend her because I know, she's out there and she's the face of so many. But I think when she did that, it really kind of opened the door to acceptance for so many people. And they're like, well, if Joyce is using it, then, But again, Joyce also says, like, I'm very much about what I call the mental illness trinity, which is therapy, medication, and God. Right. And you really need to have all three of those. And that's, one of the things that Joyce says is just because I take medication doesn't mean I just rely on my medication.
That's right.
And as much as I'm, a Christ follower, I still use my medication, and it has nothing to do with my faith.
Right.
Or my belief. It doesn't mean that I don't believe God is working on this, but...
Right. That's good. My blood pressure, little 10 milligram blood pressure doesn't mean
exactly.
I don't trust God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you probably counsel a lot of people who deal with depression. And as somebody personally who has battled with it my entire life, I know how completely, when you are in the middle of that, how positively helpless and completely isolated you can feel. So what do you tell somebody when they feel like there's no hope, and there's no reason to live anymore?
Ooh, good question.
I know that's a tough one.
And I try to be, and I've sat with many people like that, and I try to be, first of all, very empathetic. I want to be. I want them to know that this is a very safe place. You're with somebody. Yes. We love God, and yes, we're people of faith, but I also understand that in the human experience, man, you can get into sometimes the depth of darkness. I mean, that again, the 23rd Psalm, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. So we can. There will be seasons that we walk through those kinds of valleys. What I like to do with somebody who is at that point, it may be the lowest point, and they finally reached out, and we're sitting down together. I like to sometimes, because you're not gonna, what you don't want to do is give them theological platitudes, or here, take 2 scriptures and call me in the morning, and that kind of thing. What I like to do is to tell them that get them the idea of darkness, and they already know what that is. But if we can, here's where I want to take them, and I want to invite them on this journey with me, that if we can get to a place where at least we see light under the door, even though my room is dark, even though my life right now, the season I'm in right now is dark, it may be pitch dark. If I can see a little bit of light under the door, I know that there's something better and bigger out there. I may not know where the door handle is. I may not know how to get that door open yet, but at least there's some level of hope.
Right.
So we talk about that. We talk about certain things in their life that are that glimmer of hope. Because, and here's another thing is, a lot of folks who get to a point like that, especially if it's, yes, it can be clinical depression, but if it's also clinical and environmental, which normally it is, you've got some things that have triggered that.
Right.
And if we can at least agree that their life is bigger than their pain, that's where you get in trouble, when your whole life shrinks to the size of your pain.
Right.
And you don't see any.
You can't see the forest through the trees.
You can't see anything. It's just, you just know pain.
Right.
So we'll try to talk about a couple of things that are bigger than what they're experiencing. Light underneath the door. We'll take it slow. again, I want to hear them out. But we'll talk about practical steps to take as well, because depression loves to isolate,
Right.
it loves to self-talk. So we'll talk about those kinds of things. What are some practical things you can do to get out this week? What's one thing you can do? What's one conversation you can have with yourself that's not self-defeating or negative self-talk this week? We'll talk about those kinds of things. I also have some good resources that I like to take them through. I also have some wonderful therapists that I like to refer to at times that have walked that road themselves, and some wonderful coaches that I know that have walked that road themselves. And so, like you said, it's a community that helps people.
Right.
And at some point, there will be a turn. Something will happen. They'll get up in the morning. That day, the sky will look a little bluer than it did the day before. At some point, something will happen and something will turn, and they'll start to take steps in a more healthy direction. But again, the first thing we look for is at least a little light under the door. If I can do that, give them a glimmer of hope. We know that there's light on the other side. We're going to work to get there.
Right. Well, it's funny when I deal with coaching clients, and that that point comes up. I always like to kind of have them revert back to a similar memory of a time where they felt like that, but they got through it. And the more often you experience that, and of course in the Bible it talks about seasons, and there's a time to heal and a time to cry, and there's going to be seasons in everybody's life, good, bad, and indifferent, and recognizing it for what it is. It's just a season, and sometimes that can be so hard to see when everything around you is just falling apart or feels hopeless. And then Joyce, one of the things I've started incorporating that I love that Joyce does is she tells you, get your mind off yourself. Find somebody you can be a blessing to. Go help somebody. Help somebody less fortunate, so you really can see all the true blessings in your life. Good. And so those are what I usually try to encourage with my coaching clients. Because like you said, a lot of it is environmental. When you're surrounding yourself with negativity and darkness and that kind of thing, it's hard to see anybody that's light and bright and happy and healthy.
It is. It is.
Well, as someone who became a believer much later in life, my priority is sharing my personal experience so that people can see really just how different my life is now. And I feel like it's just so full of hope with my relationship with the Father now. And so my question is, what's your favorite way to share how incredible life becomes when someone makes the decision to seek a relationship with God?
Oh, that's good. That's good. Mine would be probably similar to yours. It's a testimony. This is what I was. I met Jesus, and this is what I am now. And no one can take that from you. That's I was this. I met God, and now I'm this. And again, we're not talking perfection, but we are talking something different. We're a different creature. We're transforming little by little over time. And so that's really my favorite way. Just share my story as an 18-year-old who wasn't looking for God. I wasn't on a path. I wasn't being religious. I was on a path to alcoholism. I was on a path to addiction. I was looking for the next party. I was looking for the next girl. I wasn't looking for God, and yet He stepped in and turned my life around. And I can remember one day, this was in the summer, this was between, it was before fall semester, starting back at college, and I was a freshman, and I was working construction. I remember it like it was yesterday, standing out. I was probably holding a drill or something. We were building a house, And I just remember the clouds, you know, how you'll sort of take a break and glance up and look at clouds. And I had been going to church with this one certain girl, because to date her, you had to go to church with her. And I'd never really gone to church in my life. And it all began to make sense. That just being around her, being around different people who saw things differently. A youth group who saw things differently. And it began to make sense that day. And I remember just looking up and thinking, God, you are real. This is real. Jesus really came for me. It was, and I don't know if that's the day that I just made that decision, or if it was that week. But I know it was right around that time when I just became a Christ follower. And my life changed. He doesn't do this for everybody, but he did it for me. It took away the whole lean towards drunkenness. I didn't battle with that anymore. Didn't battle with it anymore at all. And believe me, I drank just about every night of the week up to that point. Just done. I'm done with that. Again, other people have to work through that. I had to work through other things, but I didn't have to work through that. That just sort of went, and slowly, surely becoming someone different. Again, it wasn't religion; it was relationship. I felt him there. I knew that he wanted me, and you know, we love him because he first loved us. I felt that love of God, that unconditional love of God, and I responded to that. And so I like to share that story. Again, that's something that no one can take from me. I'm not always the perfect Christian. I'm not always the perfect husband or father or grandfather or driver on I-95. Not always the perfect that. But
Scott, did you hear that?
Scott. but I am a believer, and God is my friend. He is my Savior, and He is my friend, and I am in relationship with Him. So I think just sharing that is a great way for me to tell people about God.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I didn't even start seeking God till I was in my 40s, and didn't really have a starting. I mean, I went back to temple trying that because it was really the only thing that I had experience with, and it was not a good experience for me. And so from there I was kind of lost, because I was like, well, what do I do next? And I had been seeing a therapist, and she had suggested another outlet that was more spiritual, but it wasn't really a Christian based, and that was with Unitarian Universalism, which is great. I mean, I'm not going to knock anything, because everything was a stepping stone for me. And that was a stepping stone because it incorporated everything from Christianity to Buddhism to Hinduism. So it was nice because I did get to see other versions of faith that I hadn't experienced, and spent a couple years there as well. So it was really 4 years for me of seeking God before I actually found Christ. But I could see Him walking me through these steps. And I think, I mean, you ask anybody and they're always going to tell you, well, you know, life with God is hindsight's 20/20. You know, you have the faith, you hope, but then when you look back and you see all the things that He's done, you can't deny his presence in your life. And so we started, when Scott and I first met, we started journaling, and that was one of the things, was going back now and just realizing that God really has taken us so far in 10 years, and has just really, all of these situations, I mean, through COVID and through job losses, and you know, what was really so cool about it was, now I can even go back before I was even looking and see God's presence in my life,
see how it works,
before I even acknowledged Him. Like, just knowing where I was going to be with Him later on in my life. So just really keeping me out of some really, really bad situations I could have gotten into. I mean, I was really good at putting myself in those situations without anybody's help.
I was too.
So, so let me ask you a bit, kind of jumping off that one. What's the best advice that you give to somebody who is not raised with any type of belief system, and they feel overwhelmed about where to start?
Oh, good question. And I wasn't raised in any kind of belief system. I was raised in a moral home, but we weren't really raised to believe that we believed in God, whatever that was. And so again, I sort of went that way myself. But I would say if you are seeking, really, I think the best way to start is, for me, it would be a couple of places. I would say do this. Number one, just start reading through the New Testament. Start reading through, and especially get a Bible that has red letters so you can read the words of Jesus. Just read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Read through it a couple of times, especially paying attention to those words, because that's the words of Christ. And just drink those in. That yes, they were spoken to first century believers, but they are a first century audience. But they have an impact on us 2,000 years later. They were written and spoken to humans, and we're human.
Right.
Yes, at least we're most of the time we act like humans. But
not so much before I've had my coffee.
Right. Caffeine makes a difference. But I would read through those red letters. Let it speak to you, and then just begin talking to God as if He's a friend. Yes, He's Creator. Yes, He's sovereign, and all of that. We come to Him, as His creation. But talk to Him as a friend. Talk to Him as in relationship. And don't just make it a religious exercise. I'm going to go to church and check off a box.
Right.
I'm going to read through a proverb and check off a box. No, drink it in. Take it personally, because God is personal. And so I would start there. I would start with the very simple. Start with the Gospels. Pay attention to everything in red letters. Read those through a few times, and just begin to talk to God about everything. Yes, you can confess sins to Him, absolutely, but you can also talk to Him about your dreams, your wants, your desires, the things that are in your heart, all of it. Just treat Him as He is your friend. Start there.
Yes.
And I think if we knock, He answers.
Yes.
If we seek, we find. That's a promise. That's so. If you're on that journey to seek Him, you will find Him. You will. And better yet, He'll probably just come out and find you. So.
And I think that's the best part, is it really doesn't matter where you are in your journey or your walk, whether you've had any sort of organized religion in your life. God meets you where you're at. Absolutely. I mean, He really does. Absolutely. And I think I get the biggest pushback, from people that I know that were raised Jewish, like I was. And I always like to, my favorite book of the Bible is the book of Isaiah, just simply because all of the truths and all of the prophecies and everything in there that just talked about Jesus, and really not in a generalization, but very specific, all the way down to, He will be chastised for our iniquities, and by His stripes we are healed. And I know you guys all know I have my little Isaiah 53 tattoo. It is. But I think for people that are Jewish, I love to say, just read Isaiah too, because Isaiah 53 it's there. I mean, it's there, and if you're, I always say you can't pick and choose the pieces and parts of the Bible you believe. You either believe or you don't believe. It's not like I believe in this miracle, but I don't believe in this one. Right. And so if you're going to be seeking and you're going to look for something to believe in, get in that Bible, because it'll really help to open up your eyes to a lot of things that you never experienced if you didn't have that in your life. And now the best advice for those who have once established a relationship, and what are some of the things we can do to stay closely connected to God on a daily basis?
For me, the number one thing, and there's a couple of important things we've talked about, but the number one thing is talk to Him. You're in a relationship with God. Don't be relationally lazy. I do a lot of marriage counseling, and I find that couples that do this, that tend to live as roommates over the years, they drift. It's because they're not communicating, they're not talking. Talk to God. pray to God, and it's not just here's my list of things. God's okay with lists.
Right.
That's a biblical thing. Cast your cares upon Him because He cares for you. So we're to bring Him that, but also bring Him your gratefulness. Talk to Him about your own inadequacies. God, I don't feel strong today. God, help me with this today. Lord, I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good dad. Show me how to do that. God, just all those kinds of things. Talk to Him every single day. And then also, man, you need a really good long season of Bible study. I think we're mainly biblically illiterate now in America.
Yeah.
And that's maybe one reason why we are where we are. We're very divided. We're at each other all the time. There's not unity. So you need to begin to study the Bible. Get a good Bible. Get a good translation.
Yes, something you understand.
Something you understand.
Amplified Bible. I love that. I personally love that because it's a lot easier for the layperson to read.
Yeah. And it gives fuller meaning.
Yes.
Also, you can get one with commentaries and that come on every page to help you understand. Because the Bible, it needs to be, yes, you read it for you, but when you study it, you want to know what it meant to the original audience. You can't make it mean what it never meant. And so understand what it meant to the original audience. And that's just reading it and reading through some of the commentary. As you read a verse, read the commentary.
Right.
So do your due diligence. Don't be relationally lazy with God. You don't want to drift from Him. To me, that's the main things that have kept me sort of close with Him throughout these 40 plus years of being a believer. When I drift in those things, and believe me, pastors can drift as well. When I don't pray like I should, when I'm not in the Word like I should, I can feel it. I can tell.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what I would say.
It's funny because I used to have a half an hour ride back and forth to work every day, and I would get in my car, and this is kind of early on in my walk, and just start praying and talking and having that conversation, and before I knew it, I was at work. I'm like, that was a half an hour. That was crazy.
Yeah.
But one of the really cool things that I started doing, and again, this was based on one of Joyce's teachings, was instead of asking God to change my circumstances or to change the people in my life, I asked Him to change me and to work on me. And, Joyce always points out that be prepared, because that can be painful. That's stripping away a lot of the stuff, your fleshly stuff. But what's nice, I think, for me in that situation was when you ask God to change you, it doesn't matter who comes in and out of your life after that, because you're the rock in that situation. So if negative people are in and out and you've asked God to change your tolerance towards certain things, you're always going to have that foundation. It's not just one person you want to see change or situation you want to see change, but it's yourself. Because once you start changing your need to control things, your need to be perfect, your need, then it's when we invite the Holy Spirit in, it's to work on us, not to work on somebody else. And so I think that's a big thing too, is really focus your relationship with God on helping you change. And not asking for everything around you to be made convenient for you.
That's maturity, and that's hope, because nothing's hopeless. Even if nothing else is changing, you can change. Even if nothing else is changing around you, you can change. God can change, and sometimes nothing else will change until you change, because that's His plan. And so there's a lot of hope in that. A lot of hope in that. That God's not just stagnant. This whole thing isn't just sitting and disintegrating. No, I'm growing through this. Whereas maybe 2, 3, 4, 10 years ago, I wouldn't be. I would be wanting this to change and that to change. Well, I can't control what God never asked me to control.
Right.
So, which is 99% of this stuff. So
Exactly.
I'm going to simply work on me. And,
Yeah.
and that's good. That's
Control how I deal with it.
absolutely.
So yeah. I think that's one of the best things that I did was I think that was a lot of the problem I was having was just having a control issue and having, and I think we all do to some degree, but understanding that everybody has their own ideas, everybody has their own thoughts, and I think it also makes you, number one, more compassionate, but also more accepting because as Christ followers, we are taught to love everyone, and we all know how tough that can be sometimes.
Yes.
But asking God to change our heart really does help apply that when it comes into the picture, because we realize, okay, this is just how this person is. Sometimes people are angry, and it has nothing to do with us. So yeah, I think that's a real good one. What is the best advice or prayer or even book that you would recommend somebody to use if they find themselves relapsing back into depression and anxiety?
A couple of things. I've mentioned one, the Psalms. Go live there. Take little bits and nuggets. Something you don't have to memorize whole complete Psalms, but that's it. Like Psalm 23 only has 6 verses. That's pretty easy. But take little nuggets, bites of it that are just for you. Another one is the book of Job. I love Job.
Yes.
Especially chapters 38 through 42. You see the sovereignty of God, the bigness of God, and Job sees it for the very first time there, helping put his issues and his struggles in context. Again, when we get ourselves outside of, when we get our story outside of God's bigger story of grace and redemption and mercy and love, when we try to make it make sense out here, it doesn't. And so anything that can help you get it back into that context, that Scripture helps you. Ed Welch has a very good book on depression, which is a path through the darkness. You get it on Amazon or whatever. I take people through that book sometimes. There's lots of, like I said, back in the 80s and 90s, not so much.
Right.
But today there's lots of good resources out there, even good biblical resources from pastors, from teachers. And these aren't just Bible studies, although Bible studies are good. These are really good resources that get to the depth of the depression and help you take practical, meaningful approaches to it.
Yeah. I think one of the best books out there is probably Battlefield of the Mind.
Yep.
I mean, Joyce Meyer's book. If you guys
it's great.
are looking for some really good reading, I think it's one of her bestsellers. And I think like the Bible, I don't think any home should be without that book because it really does help bring a lot of that stuff into perspective as well. So my last question for you, and this is one that I guess I kind of a category I kind of fell into simply because I wasn't seeking God until I was in my 40s. But why do you think so many people wait to turn to God as a last resort?
I think it's I think it's our human experience to do that. I think we use God as a 911, sometimes an ATM. God, give me this.
Genie in a bottle.
Yes, God, give me this, that, and the other. And oh, by the way, 911. God, I'm in trouble here. But I think it's the human way to do that. But here's how you don't do that and why you don't do that. Again, I think back about marriage counseling. I think about couples. It's relational. It's relationship.
Right.
Couples will avoid conflict and confrontation and so many issues. The better communication, the less conflict. The better communication, the better conflict. The better at conflict you are. So keep the communication going with God. don't drift away from Him.
Yes.
The more you drift away, the man, you can get tossed and turned by the storms of life. And so always keep communication, always keep reading, keep that community of faith right around you, or a good community right around you. But I think it's our human nature just to say, God, I've got this. Nothing big, don't need you today.
Right.
I'm good. But then let me have an accident on I-75 or whatever, and it's like, oh God, I need you. And then listen, that's okay. God's with you right there as well. But it's kind of like we have to watch that, or we just call upon Him when we think we need Him. And we miss out on so much when we do that.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, guys, the bottom line here is that depression is a darkness, okay? It is a constant battle with an unseen enemy.
Yeah.
And we do have an unseen enemy, but God is so much greater than your struggle. Keep it simple. 4 words: seek, pray, believe, receive. It really just comes down to those simple words. It doesn't have to be a religious base. It doesn't have to be something where you're at a church. You can pray, you can speak to God anytime, anywhere. I always encourage you to do it first thing in the morning before your feet hit the ground, and get yourself prayed up. I know that a lot of you have heard my story, and if you haven't, I'm going to promote my book here and let you guys know that this is my story, and basically this is my dirty little secrets, my things that you never want to admit to people that you know or love, let alone the world. But God put this on my heart to write it, and it took me 2 years. I was like Job, I ran, and then I got swallowed up by the whale. But it's available on Amazon, and it does go into a lot more detail about my walk with God and how I found God and how I started seeking Him. And it's encouraging. So if you guys don't have it, go ahead and get it. It's on Amazon. And if you are a local and you live in the South Florida area, Davie, Plantation, Pembroke Pines, come out and check out the local church and meet Johnny and the rest of the awesome pastors here. The services are 8:30, 10, 11:30, and 1 on Sundays. And you guys will not regret it. This is such a wonderful environment, and you're going to walk in and you're going to feel the love. You're going to feel the love as soon as you walk through those doors. And one thing that I can say about this congregation and this church and its leaders is that it really is everybody's loved on here. It doesn't matter who you are, what you are, where your background comes from.
Come as you are.
Where you are in life, who you are in life, just come. Because the important thing here is that God loves you. We love you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we just want to see you happy, and we want to see you connected. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me.
This was a lot of fun. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. And make it a beautiful and blessed day. Peace out.
See ya.